Hi everyone, this is Arwen McCaffrey here to share with you my inquiry project into the movie Cloud Atlas. So I do need to start off by making a very generic disclaimer that none of the images, sounds, and video clips I use in the presentation, obviously, they don't belong to me. I'm not nearly as clever as the people who made them. They belong to directors Tom Tykwer, the Wachowskis, Warner Brothers, and so on. And they were all found on Google Images or YouTube. So let's get started here. Let me introduce you to the movie I chose. Cloud Atlas was released in 2012 and was directed by Tom Tykwer and the Wachowskis of Matrix trilogy fame, and was adapted from a 2004 novel of the same name by author David Mitchell. It follows 6 seemingly unrelated timelines that span over the course of 500 years. Each timeline has its own set of protagonists and antagonists, but each protagonist is inspired to make change in their lives and in their societies by the actions of the preceding protagonist. The film has themes of interconnectedness, but also of personal growth and how our actions shape the world around us. So my thesis is that Cloud Atlas provides equipment for living for those who feel disconnected from the world by demonstrating that our lives are intertwined and thus our actions affect everyone around us, whether for better or for worse, and that we can individually contribute to the greater good if we choose to do so, even if those results aren't immediately visible to us. So now a bit about the literature that preceded and influenced my research. Both Jurgensen and Frentzen-Farrell discuss how films often personify larger scale societal issues, and by doing this, they can help the audience make personal connections to societal issues and inspire them to make change, both in their own lives as well as in society at large. Keisner explains that in order to gather equipment for living from a film, we need to abandon our logical reality for the often illogical setting of the film narrative. And Ott describes something he called the acoustic space of a film, which is the sort of all-encompassing fluid atmosphere of film that helps resonate with the viewer on an emotional level, which again helps the viewer connect with the message and take equipment for living from the film. This is certainly true for Cloud Atlas because it is such a visually and emotionally rich story with 6 separate worlds, and it's nearly impossible not to get sucked into it. The methodology I employed during my research is to show how the directors made very deliberate artistic choices to foster a sense of interconnectedness into the film, including music, set design, and recurring symbols, but primarily through the casting choices they made. My personal story on how this film inspired me and gave me equipment for living will be used as data as well, and I analyzed it through a critical tradition lens. So I focused primarily on Mark Orb's co-cultural theory, which discusses power dynamics between dominant and marginalized groups, and how the marginalized or co-cultural groups negotiate their place in the system, which is something that dominates all the stories in Cloud Atlas. Standpoint theory looks at how our perspectives, or our standpoints, are shaped by our experiences as members of different groups based on our age, race, gender, and so on. And finally, Weaver's idea of a tyrannizing image is a way to describe an ideal that a society strives to reach. So as I stated previously, there are 6 separate timelines that all intersect, but for the sake of this presentation and my time limitations, I'm not going to describe all of them for you. But you can see there on your screen. They range from the South Pacific in 1849 all the way up through the Big Island on 2321 in 2321, which is sort of set in after a very large post-apocalyptic sort of event. So there's not a lot of humans left. Each timeline also has its own genre, ranging from either action to sci-fi to comedy to period piece. So there's something that appeals to everybody in this film. The primary tool the film utilizes in order to convey a message of interconnectedness is through the use of casting. So they took a large cast of actors, including Tom Hanks, Hugo Weaving, and Halle Berry, who you can see in the images here, and each of the actors plays multiple roles. They play characters of different ages, genders, sexual orientations, and races, and they change from either main characters to background characters, sometimes to supporting characters, and often they're virtually unrecognizable. It's a way of hinting at souls coming back and living different lives, and how their choices in a previous life may affect their personal journey in their next life. And one symbol that ties these 6 protagonists together is a comet-shaped birthmark that they each have. And I read an article that suggested that the comet is a symbol for a sort of fusion between the scientific and the metaphysical in the soul's evolution, which I thought was really interesting and really relevant to the film. Some other reoccurrences in the film are items like the piece of music called the Cloud Atlas Sextet, which is used in many different forms. Each timeline plays it in some way. Some feature it more than others. But it serves as a death hymn. It's a background jazz quartet piece. It's a piano composition, and so on. I've included a sample of it here because I think it communicates a lot about the feeling of the film or the acoustic space. And plus, I think it's just an extraordinarily haunting and beautiful piece of music. And everyone should hear it. So I'm going to play a little bit of it for you here. Okay, so there are a few other elements that repeat. There are things like the sets, which were deliberately reused to create a sort of unconscious familiarity with the audience. There are makeup choices like the use of facial tattoos that you see here. Not every character has this exact tattoo, but certainly a lot of the characters throughout the different timelines seem to have facial or body tattoos. And the image of the sun, the sunrise here in this tattoo, that image reappears in a lot of pieces of background and makeup and things like that. And there are a few others, but they're a little more, they're more minor. So as I mentioned earlier, Keisner discusses abandoning the logical reality, embracing the reality of the film. This is definitely necessarily in Cloud Atlas because not only are there 6 separate timelines to follow, but the film cuts from one to the other very frequently, and the narratives don't transpire in a linear fashion. The 2 sets of characters seen here are played by the same actor and actress. In the futuristic timeline pictured above, the female character is executed for her part in a rebellion. Cinematically, the scene with her death is immediately followed by the reuniting of Adam and Tilda, who are the lovers at the bottom there, who are played by the same actors in a much earlier timeline. So while it makes sense in the context of the film, it certainly doesn't play out in any sort of logical way. So now on to my critical theory-based analysis. So each protagonist is a member of what Mark Orb labels as a co-cultural group, a group that's marginalized and trying to negotiate the system in which another group is dominant. Their oppressors vary. They range from corporate greed to slavery to cultural violence, and they're also embodied by individuals who want to suppress and control them. He discusses how these groups communicate with each other in order to deal with the system that they live in, which actually transpires across the timelines and ultimately connects the timelines. They're inspired by the words of their predecessors, and their messages are in various forms, from a book to a journal to personal letters. And this demonstrates that the method in which the message is communicated is irrelevant, but that the co-cultural members can still work together and influence each other. So Harding and Collins talk about their standpoint theory and describe how our identities are an intersection of various groups that we belong to, determined by race, gender, and sexuality, and so on. The multiple use of actors in different roles is a really effective metaphor for this theory, which the actors playing their various roles symbolize the different groups or identities that we all have as individuals, and demonstrates in a large-scale way that in one timeline we can challenge many kinds of oppression. This theory also explains that our standpoints are formed by resisting power relations that contribute to our marginalization, which of course occurs throughout Cloud Atlas. So there are many kinds of actions throughout the film that contribute to what could be termed the greater good. Just as in real life, not every character is a revolutionary. In fact, most actions that take place are very small, ordinary actions. In Cloud Atlas, these actions include things as easy as handing over a report, to standing up to family members that want to push their ideas on others. And of course, the ultimate example in Cloud Atlas is two different characters who fight against the institution of slavery. So an even easier demonstration of an action that contributes is the changing of our perceptions about something. Weaver's term tyrannizing image describes cultural ideals that societies strive to achieve. However, they aren't necessarily morally righteous ideals. The protagonists in Cloud Atlas all stand up to their oppressors, and by doing so are often rejecting their culture's tyrannizing images. This may seem insignificant, but we have no idea how our altered perceptions may affect those around us or in the future. So I was personally very moved by Cloud Atlas. I was actually initially annoyed at the film because of the complex and nonlinear timeline. But by the time the film ended, it had become one of my favorite movies. I was overwhelmed with resonance and connection and meaning. And I'd been feeling pressured for most of my adult life about finding my professional path, and that it was one in which I could contribute positively to the world. I've always felt very obligated to do so, but haven't been sure how to go about it. And I always figured I had to have some sort of master plan. So by the end of the film, I felt so reassured that my everyday actions actually carried more meaning than I had previously thought, and that just because I don't necessarily see tangible, immediate results of my actions doesn't mean that they don't have a positive effect on those around me or on society at large. And so I was given a level of solace that I hadn't found previously from Cloud Atlas. So now to conclude, Cloud Atlas provided me equipment for living by helping me feel connected to my fellow man, and inspired me to think that my actions can definitely have a positive impact on the world around me, and that perhaps, hopefully, I'd already done so. I also felt inspired that I could fight several types of oppression in my lifetime, and that I don't have to have one MO, so to speak, and follow only that path. So thank you so much, everybody, for your time. I really hope, if you haven't seen this movie previous to my presentation, that you go out and view it, because it absolutely, it has something for everybody, and it has such a broad appeal. The complexity actually works for the film because it can reach such a broad audience. And it shows that it doesn't matter who you are or where you are on your personal journey, that you're important and that you can make a difference. So thanks for listening, everybody, and I look forward to seeing everybody else's presentations. Okay, thanks so much.